So yesterday I had a sales call that went really well, and I talked very little in comparison to my other calls, I should say. And so I wanted to share here what I did differently than I normally do. So hopefully it helps somebody who's an over explainer when it comes to sales like I am. So let me explain really quickly what we do so you have some context, and then I'll transition to what I did. So our company, we own a marketing company where we help dance studio owners with increasing the amount of students that they get. So if you think about a dance studio, a local business, what they're looking for in order to grow their business is they want more students. And back in 2019, my wife and I, we used to own a dance studio. We neither of us were entrepreneurs, and we joined some marketing programs, business coaching programs, masterminds. We bought courses. And that year, we learned a lot about how to market our dance studio. Within 3 months, we doubled our studio's revenue. By the end of when we had our studio, so this is in March of 2020, maybe April of 2020, we closed our studio. So after COVID happened, a month after, a pipe underneath our studio clogged and it flooded our studio with sewage water, and we were faced with a choice of do we want to continue because the landlord wasn't giving us any rent breaks. He also wanted us to tear the floorings down, do the sanitation, put new floorings back on. Anyway, it was going to be a lot of money for us back then to do the whole sanitation and repairing everything. And so at that point, we decided to break our lease because by then, on top of like the fact that it was a lot of money to sanitize and repair everything, my passion for teaching as a dance teacher. So I had been a dance instructor for many years, for about 8, 9 years. And my passion for teaching was kind of going down, and my passion for business, or my curiosity towards business and marketing, was going up. And so I had a lot of dance studio owner friends who I knew were struggling with the marketing. We were wondering if there was an opportunity here to do what we had done for us in our studio, to market for other dance studios. And so we decided to break our lease, and we started trying to make this company work. Anyway, fast forward to now, that's what we do. And I speak to a lot of dance studio owners. I've spoken to thousands of them. I've had lots of sales calls. And right now, we're currently working with over 230 clients. Anyway, now on to sales. So, when it comes to sales for us, I am, my tendency is to be an over explainer. So, where this comes from, well, number one, I'm just like an overthinking, or my tendency has always been to be an overthinker. But I've also, like I said, I was a dance instructor for about 8, 9 years, and I was mostly teaching beginner classes where I had to break down very complex dance moves into very simple, easy to understand, so that anybody can follow along and make progress. And so I developed a habit of like explaining everything and try to water it down, not water it down, but simplify things so that somebody can understand something that's complex and break it down into simple steps so that they could get it. And that's the same thing that I would do in sales calls. I would explain I would take all of the complexities of our program, like the way our program works is that we have advertising to help our clients get the word out there and get people to inquire about their classes, and then we have automation to follow up with those people who inquire, so that when somebody inquires, the studio owner doesn't have to chase that person down. The automation will follow up with them and get them to walk in. And then, so there's a lot of technical details to it. It's complex, but I pride myself in being able to take complex things and breaking them down into simple concepts and explaining them and walking people through the logical chain of thoughts that I've had to get. So, like, explain to people the problems that I was facing, the decisions that I made about how I created a program and why it's created the way it's created, and then explain to them the logic so that they could see the logic. Because in my mind, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, the more I explain the logic to people, rather than me like selling somebody by saying like, hey, this is what you need, this is what you should do. Just kind of like how I imagine a bad salesperson is. The way I thought about it is like, if I can walk people through the logic of how I made the decisions, they could themselves come to the same conclusion that I came up with. Therefore, they'll like have no like come to the conclusion that they should buy from us. That's like what I was thinking. Now, yesterday as I did my sales call, that's not how I approached it. Instead, I chose to rely more on like being concise, on conviction, and I was trying to figure out how I can say the least possible while being the most persuasive, right? And so in my mind, I have this idea of like, okay, if I can walk, or this is how I've always thought about it. If I can explain people in a thorough way the logic of of the problems that I face that they probably have, and how and then the solutions that I came up with, and the logic of how I came up with those solutions. If I walk them through everything and be and I'm thorough, but not just thorough, but I'm also speaking about things in a very simple way that they could understand. If I walk them through all of that, they're going to have no choice but to think like, okay, well, they've already thought about everything, so I'm going to buy from them. But that's so what ends up happening is that my calls are super long. My sales calls are super long, and I have to walk people through all the logic. And so I was trying to think, I'm like, how can I cut the time of the sales calls down? And how can I know I have a technical product to sell, but like, how can I how can I sell it in the least amount of words? So I started the conversation with asking the person that I was speaking to about their goals, what they want, why they want what they want, what happens if they don't do what they like, if they don't grow, why did they think that they need to make a change? What happens if they don't make a change? What happens if they do and it works? So I walked them through all of this, or not walk them through, but ask them questions to find out. And I was kind of summarizing what they were saying and using labels to say things like, wow, that sounds like you were under a lot of stress. So I was empathizing with them so that they could feel that I was understanding them. And eventually, once I felt like I had a good understanding, and they have and they were thorough about explaining why they thought that they needed to make a change. Then I said at some point, I'm like, hey, based on what you're sharing, it sounds like these are the problems that you have. And then they're like, yeah, that sounds like that those are the problems. And then I was like, look, based on that, we've helped a lot of people solve those problems. I'm confident that we can help you solve those problems. And then I just sort of stayed quiet, and they're like, and the person was like, yeah, like, oh wow, that would be great. And I was like, yeah, look, I want to walk you through what we do. And by the way, just to pause right there, when you say something, I realize the power of silence. Like if I said like, hey, I feel like we're confident in that we can help you deliver this. Here's what we could do, blah, 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 blah. If I say things like that and don't let them land, they're not as persuasive. So I'm learning that a lot of persuasion comes from like not, I should say, like non-verbal communication, and the use of silence, the using shorter sentences. And that's something that I have to work against myself, because I'm an over explainer, and I've had to be, because I trained myself back when I was a teacher to explain things from many different perspectives to get everybody to understand what I was talking about. And so I'm having to fight this. And so anyway, so I say to the person, hey, I'm confident that based on what we've done here for our other clients, we've helped people in similar situations. I'm confident we can help you too. And then just let that land. And now they have to react to that. And she's like, oh, yeah, I mean, that would be amazing. And I was like, yeah, would it be okay to walk you through how our program works? And then she says, yeah. And so then normally I would plunge into all this detail about how our program works and all the technical stuff explained in simple terms. I thought I was doing good because I was explaining things simply and I was getting people to follow along with my logic. But yesterday, what I did is I just said, look, from to our program does a lot of things so that you can understand it in like the simplest way possible. I want to break it down into the three biggest things that we focus on for our clients. Number one, we do X, Y, and Z, which would help you with this thing that you said. Number two, you said that you were struggling with this. Our program will help you with that because of this thing that our program does. And then number three, this other experience that you mentioned that you've had that didn't end up working out, this is our program, what it does, and it's meant to help you solve that problem. And so those are the three biggest things that we focus on. If we did this, I know we'll be able to help you grow your students. And then and then again, letting them react to that. And she's like, yeah, that's really good. I'm like, how do you think that could help you? And she's like, yeah, that's exactly what we need. And then I said, look, based on our what we've analyzed our clients' results to be, our average client gets this much results. They get this many leads. They're able to get this many students. At the worst case scenario, here's the worst case that could happen. And so notice how I'm using like very short, concise information here, shorter sentences, and letting them react to it. And then she was like, yeah, that sounds amazing. And then like what I did after is I was just like to kind of wrap everything up. I'm like, hey, um, today we just happened to have one of our clients do a success call that she started 6 weeks with us. I want to play it for you so you could get to hear from her what her experience has been like. And she's like, yeah, let's do it. So I played the call. And then by the end of it, she understood what our program did, from a big picture perspective, saw the result, heard about the results, heard from one of our clients, and she was ready to sign up. And that's like it took me like almost half the time that I would normally take to make a sale. And so it's not like this is new information for me because this is something that I've tried in the past and it's also worked in the past. Where I try to be more concise. It's just something that I consistently have to fight because I feel like I'm fighting my nature of like over explaining things. And I rely on the fact that I feel like I'm a good teacher and I feel like I can take complex topics and I'm able to break them down. But I have this visual in mind or this thought that comes to mind that's kind of like this. Like if you think about being persuasive, you need some amount of words, right? Like you need to say something to persuade somebody. But in my mind, I was thinking, I'm like, okay, if I can give everybody the entire train of thought of all of the problems that they have like all of the problems that we've solved in our company that they probably have, and I can lay it down in a logical way where they can come to the conclusion that yeah, we can help them. I thought that would be like the best argument possible, the best sales pitch. Like if it was airtight and logical and it's simple to understand, then I thought, yeah, that's like the best way to sell. But now I'm realizing, and it's not like right this second, it's just something that I've been realizing, and it's something that I always want to put to practice, but it feels like it's not coming naturally to me yet. More and more it is. It's like if you think about the words that you need to be persuasive, there's almost like a threshold where after you say something to somebody, more words than that starts to muddy up. It starts to water down your persuasiveness, your argument, your sales pitch. It starts to water it down. It's like it's not like less is more, but more than enough is less, I guess. So, yeah, I wanted to share this because, again, I saved like half the time making a sale yesterday than I normally would have. Um, and part of it was because I felt like I was being more concise, which made the whole thing more persuasive. I also feel like people can only hold so much information in their brain, so the more you give them, it's eventually at some point it's kind of like when you're chatting with AI, where it's like the context window is so long, and eventually you overload the context window, and it has to forget certain parts of it, and it also has to do compaction where it needs to forget certain details. And I feel like the more so yeah, it's I guess that's a good analogy. It's like you want to give an argument that fits within the context window, is short enough, but it's enough. And then like people are able to hold that in their brain. And the fact that they're able to hold it and understand it in their mind, the fact that they understand it makes it even more persuasive than like, yeah, when I walk through people through the entire logical chain of thoughts, I felt like they were understanding and they were following along, but it got to be so much that they were starting to get to forget details. So if you're an over explainer, try being more concise. It's the bottom line. Again, in my over explaining style, this is a long-winded video, but I wanted to share because I like talking a lot here, but in the sales calls, I feel like I need to be a lot more concise. So hope that helps. Wanted to share. See you in the next video. Bye.